Hello and good day. I'm Mike Cohen. This is NBN's coverage of the U.S. presidential election from the Pinoy Perspective. It's Wednesday in Manila, Tuesday still in St. Paul and Minneapolis, where the Republicans are wrapping up day 2 of their convention. With the threat of Hurricane Gustav gone, it's back to business, or rather back to politics, as the Republicans get back on track with their convention in the Twin Cities. President George W. Bush, who had earlier canceled his trip to the convention in the face of Hurricane Gustav, finally addressed the GOP via satellite from the White House.
Thank you, Laura, and good evening. As you know, my duties have me here in Washington tonight to oversee the federal government's efforts to help citizens recover from Hurricane Gustav. We are thankful that the damage in New Orleans and across the Gulf Coast was less than many had feared. I commend the governors of Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas for their sure-handed response and seamless coordination with the federal government. I thank all the wonderful volunteers who stepped forward to help their brothers and sisters in need. We know that there is still risk even after the storm has passed. So I ask citizens across the region to listen closely to local officials and follow their instructions before returning to their homes. All of us are keeping the people of the Gulf Coast in our thoughts and our prayers. As you gather tonight in St. Paul, I want to share some thoughts about our nominee, a great American, and the next President of the United States, John McCain. Before I do so, I want to say hello to 2 people in the hall with you tonight. I could have no finer examples of character, decency, and integrity than my mom and dad, and I love you a lot. I know what it takes to be president. In these past 8 years, I've sat at the Resolute desk and reviewed the daily intelligence briefings, the threat assessments, and the reports from our commanders on the front lines. I've stood in the ruins of buildings knocked down by killers and promised the survivors I would never let them down. I know the hard choices that fall solely to a president. John McCain's life has prepared him to make those choices. He is ready to lead this nation. From the day of his commissioning, John McCain was a respected naval officer who made decisions on which the lives of others depended. As an elected public servant, he earned the respect of colleagues in both parties as a man to follow when there's a tough call to make. John McCain's life is a story of service above self. 40 years ago, in an enemy prison camp, Lieutenant Commander McCain was offered release ahead of others who had been held longer. His wounds were so severe that anyone would have understood if he had accepted. John refused. For that selfless decision, he suffered nearly 5 more years of beatings and isolation.
There was some revamp in the speaker slots that had to be made. Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who was supposed to be the keynote speaker Tuesday night, was dropped. His slot was given to former Senator Fred Thompson of Tennessee, one of McCain's rivals for the Republican nomination, and independent Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut. Now, he was the Democrats' vice presidential candidate in 2000 and is now an avid McCain supporter. Thompson and Lieberman talked about McCain's life and their friendship with him. Hundreds of protesters were formally charged in court for staging violent demonstrations around the convention site. St. Paul police said 130 of those arrested were charged with felonies. The rest were charged with various misdemeanors, including property damage. 5 police cars were damaged during violent protests. The Republican convention has been designated as a national special security event, meaning the Secret Service is responsible for planning and implementing security. But the primary responsibility for street-level security falls on local police agencies. St. Paul received $50 million in federal grant money to pay for the additional security. Hurricane Gustav may have given a rocky start to the GOP convention, but the way the party handled the emergency bode well for John McCain, perhaps in more ways than what is obvious.
Everything was upbeat and festive till Saturday. Then the storm clouds hovered over the Gulf and cast uncertainty as far away as Minnesota and Washington. The White House had canceled the trip of President Bush and Vice President Cheney to the GOP convention. All throughout his campaign, Senator McCain has tried to distance himself from unpopular issues that have hurt the Bush administration, often earning him criticism for not being Republican enough. This time, nature appeared to have dealt a helping hand. National conventions are structured around traditional rites. Party delegates gather, roll call votes are cast, and the party standard bearer is nominated. But John McCain, the presumptive nominee, was not about to wear his presidential suit. He was about to roll up his sleeves and ride out the storm, where he knew he was needed. Convention organizers had to put that well-thought-out plans on hold and let nature orchestrate matters for a change. Putting the country first, as they say. To many observers, this may well have been the Republicans' saving grace, proving to one and all that they too can break with tradition, and if it comes to embrace change.
Coming up next, Sarah Palin, what the urban moms think about her candidacy in the face of family duties. Stay with us. This is MBN. The Republicans are sending a team of lawyers to Alaska to get a handle on what they are calling the Palin outbreaks. On Monday, in the midst of disruptions in the convention schedule, Sarah Palin announced that her unmarried 17-year-old daughter Bristol was pregnant. This, in addition to news that she, the governor, has a private lawyer in an ethics probe in Alaska. While there are supportive voices from everywhere, wary party members were skeptical about McCain's wisdom in choosing Ms. Palin for vice president. Mr. McCain defended his decision, saying he had her thoroughly checked out and was happy with the results. How is she supposed to juggle her role as vice president? She's also a mom to a Down syndrome baby and has a pregnant teenage daughter. This is the overriding concern of women, as posted in recent blog posts about Sarah Palin. Dina Libonao has that story.
When Governor Sarah Palin of Alaska was introduced as vice presidential pick, she was presented as a magnet for female voters. But since then, some have voiced their concerns. With 5 children, including an infant with Down syndrome and a pregnant 17-year-old, Palin has set off a fierce argument among women about whether there are enough hours in the day for her to take on the presidency and whether she is right to try. Can she put the country first before baby? The issue of motherhood and work divide has been raised, which had been quickly dismissed by the McCain camp as irrelevant, as it was not raised with Obama, who is also a parent. But many women, citing their own difficulties with less demanding jobs, said it would be impossible for Ms. Palin to succeed at both motherhood and in the second highest elected position at once. They said, you can juggle a BlackBerry and a breast pump in a lot of jobs, but not in the vice presidency. Dina Libonao, NBN.
Senator John McCain's stand on immigration in part 2 of our series on the campaign issues. That's coming right up on NBN.